Good day, everyone. I am Rakal Jayabaro. So today we are going to explore a new lesson, which is assessment-based grading. It is an approach that emphasizes accurate, meaningful, and fair representation of student learning. So this lesson will help us understand how grading works, why it matters, and how teachers make sound grading decisions. Before we begin, let's look at what we aim to accomplish. Here is our learning objectives. First is to understand key definitions, functions, and purposes of grading. Second is to explain how grading supports learning, communication, and evaluation. And lastly, analyze the fairness and impact of different grading practices in real classroom situations. To ground our lesson, let's first explore how different experts define grading. Different authors define grading in ways that highlight its complexity. Macmillan sees grading as a professional judgment shaped by experience and context, which he emphasizes that grading is interpretive and influenced by teacher knowledge and context. It means that grades are not purely numerical calculations. They rely on the teacher's interpretation of the student performance, the context of learning, and the teacher's knowledge of the students. In contrast to Macmillan's definition of grading, Popham defines grading as assigning symbols representing achievement. His focus is on accuracy and validity, meaning that grades should only reflect academic achievement, not on behavior, attitude, effort, or compliance. For Popham, mixing non achievement factors with academic grades weakens their meaning. While Miller describes grading as a systematic summary of mastery, he emphasizes the need for clear criteria, consistent measurement, and alignment with learning outcomes. Miller believes grading should be structured and uniformly applied to ensure fairness and reliability. Another key voice in assessment offers a definition that clarifies the purpose behind grading. So Brookhart says that the primary purpose of grading, whether for individual assignment or report cards, should be to communicate information to both students and their parents about students' goal attainment, about achievement of curricular aims. It means that grading is the process of evaluating and reporting achievement in ways that are accurate, meaningful, and supportive of learning. Now that we know how grading is defined, let's move on into why we grade, its purpose, and functions. For both Brookhart and O'Connor, the exclusive grading criterion is goal attainment or mastery of curricular standards. This viewpoint is supported by Popham. He stated that truly defensible grading requires the teacher to make students' achievement of clearly understood curricular aims, the solitary consideration in determining the grades to be communicated to students and parents. Miller identifies three major functions: instructional uses, reporting to parents, and administrative or guidance uses. Let's examine these functions more closely. Instructionally, grades help teachers and students understand learning progress. They highlight strengths and areas for improvement. For example, when students consistently miss the same type of question, the teacher can see this pattern in their grades and reteach the concept. Another major function is communication. Reports to parents or guardians. A core purpose of grading is to inform parents about their child's learning progress. It means that grades provide parents with a clear picture of their child's academic standing. Reports should help parents understand school objectives and how well the child is meeting them. For instance, when a parent sees a science grade of 78, they understand that the child is meeting expectations but may still need support in certain skills. Now we look at how grades serve administrative needs. Grades are used for promotion, retention, honors, and selection for programs. This makes consistency and accuracy essential. With this purpose in mind, we now move to the core of grading, the teacher's judgment. Grading is not just a mathematical or mechanical process. According to Macmillan, teachers must make professional judgment when interpreting student performance. This judgment exists even when numbers are involved. Teachers decide what assessment matter, how to weigh tasks, and whether improvement influences the final grade. For example, even if two teachers use the same rubric, their interpretation of what counts as excellent may slightly differ. Next, let's explore Macmillan's categories of grading functions. Macmillan explains that grades provide feedback, serve as comparison points, and influence motivation. So this function will be furtherly discussed by the next presenter. This function connects closely to formative assessment. Formative grading focuses on using information from assessments to support student learning while instruction is still happening. So it means that the formative purpose of grading is to support learning during instruction. Macmillan explains that one major function of grading is to provide feedback that shows students their strengths and weaknesses so they can improve performance. After instruction is complete, grading shifts to summative role. The summative purpose of grading is to document and summarize student achievement after instruction. It means that summative grading measures achievement at the end of a unit or term. For instance, final exams and end of quarter performance tasks summarize everything students have learned. To ensure that these purposes are carried out fairly, objectivity plays a major role. Objective grading attempts to minimize personal bias by focusing on clear, uniform, and measurable criteria. Macmillan notes that objectivity relies on consistent procedures, such as scoring keys or rubrics, that reduce interpretive differences between teachers. Let's look at what makes grading objective. First, it uses a standardized scoring, applies the same criteria to all students, relies on clear rubrics or checklists, emphasizes observable evidence. Examples are multiple choice tests with answer keys, true or false or matching items, and rubric-based performance tasks. As what I've mentioned earlier about the administrative use of grading, which is for promotion, retention, honors, and selection for programs, it connects to how objective grading works. So the preference for objectivity in grading is important because these marks have important uses, which are school class placements, college admissions, scholarship awards, and etc. But undeniably, grades also affect individual students' perception of themselves and their motivation. So objectivity helps grading meet goals, but how much objectivity is there in grading? Because even the most objective systems still involve subjectivity. Teachers cannot rely only on numbers. Judgment is always involved. The interpretation affects what counts as mastery, how much to weigh certain tasks, and whether improvement matters. Macmillan states that judgment are necessary, even when calculations are used. But always remember, as a future educator, we have to be very careful about our judgments. Now, let's find out what influences these judgments. Teacher judgments emerge from a combination of professional knowledge and personal influences, according to Macmillan. These include experiences, beliefs, and values. So teacher judgment is shaped by beliefs, experiences, knowledge of students, and context. Additional influences also come into play, which are knowledge of students, content expertise, and classroom norms. Teachers consider improvement, student challenges, and learning conditions. So these influences sometimes create tensions. Teachers regularly face competing priorities while grading. Some tensions include professional judgment versus school policies, which these policies may conflict with what a teacher believes is fair. Next is authenticity versus accountability. Teachers want meaningful assessment, but standardized policy pressures influence grading. Next, we have fairness and flexibility. Students have different needs, but too much flexibility may seem unfair to others. Last, we have accuracy versus compassion. Teachers may want to support struggling students while still maintaining standards. For instance, a teacher may want to allow late submissions, but school policy might require strict deadlines. So these tensions produce reflective grading questions. Teachers often must make decisions that do not have a single correct answer. Here are some of the typical questions teachers ask related to assessment and grading that are answered by using their professional judgment. And even more questions arises as grading becomes more complex. There are no straightforward or correct answers to these questions, and even when you come to an understanding of how these questions should be answered, there are always individual situations that demand flexibility. Now let's move on to the task. Instruction. You will examine several grading scenarios. Each scenario presents a real-life challenge that teachers often face when making grading decisions. Your task is to read each scenarios carefully, analyze the situation, and reflect on the questions provided. Please take a screenshot on each scenario as we are proceeding to the external factors that influence grading. Scenario 1. Scenario 2. Scenario 3. Scenario 4. And Scenario 5. Let's tackle about the external pressures on grading. Teachers also face external pressures from students, parents, administrators, and policies. For example, a parent may request grade reconsideration, or they may challenge the grade or expect certain outcomes. Administrators may expect a higher passing rates too. So it's really a challenge for a teacher when it comes to grading. Beyond pressures, teachers also deal with practical constraints. Macmillan points out constraints such as large class sizes, heavy grading loads, limited time to review complex tasks, pressure to return grades quickly, requirements to document decisions, and curriculum pacing demands. So these factors can lead teachers to choose grading approaches that are practical, though not always ideal. To end this discussion, let's have the key takeaways. First is grading always involves professional judgment. But always remember, as a teacher, we have to be very careful of our judgment. Second is teachers interpret evidence differently based on experience and beliefs. External pressures and school policies influence decisions. Ethical dilemmas are common and require thoughtful balancing. Practical constraints shape what grading practices are feasible, and effective grading requires fairness and clarity. So all in all, grading is a complex process involving fairness, accuracy, and professional judgment. It serves a multiple function, supporting learning, communication, administrative decision-making, and its summative and formative purpose. While objectivity is important, grading inevitably involves human interpretation. Understanding these principles helps ensure that grading reflects true student learning. Thank you for watching.